Hello, I'm ABX2Cat and welcome back to our second channel video. Today I have some more geography with Toy Cat. It's everyone's favourite second channel series that you keep requesting, so I'll keep talking over maps. And today I'm going to be talking over a European map. Well, it's still a world map, but we're going to be talking over the European section of the map because I wanted to kind of address something because a lot of you aren't from Europe, and even if you are from Europe, you probably know about the big countries in Europe. Like everyone knows Sweden, good old Sweden. Everyone knows Germany and Poland and Ukraine and France and Spain and the UK, right? Everyone knows the major countries in Europe, and if you look on a map, you'll probably learn about Slovakia and Hungary and even Montenegro and Bulgaria, etc. But the thing about Europe is there are so many countries that are kind of hidden, whether they're because they're in countries inside other countries or because they're actually tiny little micro-state countries. I think it'd be kind of interesting to talk about because, again, Europe is very unique in having a lot of these things, and I thought it'd be cool to go through the secret countries of Europe. So that's why I have for you all today. Hopefully you do all enjoy it. Let's get straight into it. So let's start by talking about the most commonly known micro-countries, because we'll start with the micro-states, because I think they're kind of cool, just how many small countries there is in Europe. Like, it's an interesting little thing about Europe you don't see very often. Like, look at the US, like, big country, oh, well, the North America, I should say. Big country, big country, big country. A little bit of mess, but then it's all over. Whereas Europe is just, oh, what is this whole mess? And one of the parts of this whole mess is there's a lot of micro countries, including this one right here. So you see my mouse pointer? Right now, the little dot is inside Liechtenstein, our first little country that you probably have heard about. So yeah, Liechtenstein is probably the most famous micro country inside Europe, and it's in between Switzerland and Austria, and it's actually pretty decently sized, like for a micro country anyway, because you can actually see it on a map, and it's like that. So what is interesting about Liechtenstein? Why does it exist? All this sort of thing. So to give you a very condensed history, I believe they had their own prince that was friends of the Swiss prince, and for some reason they just left them alone during all these wars, and now they have their own territory that's its own thing. However, for most international relations, they are kind of the same as Swiss. They have the exact same relationship with the EU as the Swiss. They use the Swiss franc, and the only key difference is that the people that live there are German and not Swiss. And then there's an interesting little thing. I'd show you some street view around the place, but I can't. I can only show you Bubble Spiz, because one of the really interesting things, so here's what Liechtenstein looks like, by the way. 37,000 people live here, less than most cities, and you can rent the entire country out if you want to. Well, they'll put like custom street signs, custom currency, and it only costs you $70,000 a night. So yeah, rent a country if you want to. You just can't look around it on Street View. And just as a little interesting little point there, it's interesting that all the German country, or the German speaking, or the Germanic countries in Europe, all don't allow Street View around. So if you look, Germany won't allow it, Austria doesn't allow it, and even does Liechtenstein. Whereas if you look around the map, there's very few other countries that join in that. Even Russia lets you Street View the entire country. So just an interesting little side note I figured I'd mention. You can't Street View Liechtenstein even if you want to, but you can rent it out, and you could probably run Street View around it then. Actually, I don't know if that's how laws work. But still, Liechtenstein, the first of the micro countries, one of the more interesting ones because it's mentioned a lot, and one of the ones you can actually rent yourself. One you couldn't rent yourself, or you might be able to if you have enough money, is actually the richest micro country in Europe, which is Monaco over here. You see how it just clicked right in? So yeah, Monaco is a country that you might not actually know as a country, but you probably heard of in TV because of their very famous Monte Carlo casino. So yeah, the Monte Carlo casino and the Monaco GP, which because they have a street course here, because they have a lot of money to just give people, is why people come here. And yeah, it's basically in the south of France. It's bordered entirely by the south of France, but it's still its own little country here, and it's kind of unique. So one fun fact before we leave Monaco, because I know I think it's cool and rich and expensive and stuff, is the fact that the Monte Carlo casino, the very famous one that you see in all of this thing over here, the thing that you see in all the movies, you're not actually allowed to gamble there if you live in Monaco. If you are one of the 30 or so thousand residents that live in Monaco, you cannot go and gamble in their local casino. Which is interesting to me. It's only for foreigners, which it seems like a nice little measure. That should be like all casinos, maybe. With that said, though, let's back out and let's show you the next one, which is going to be, again, with France, but between France and Spain. So you see this little bubble here between France and Spain? That's Andorra. It's its own separate country, and it's one of the most interesting countries because instead of just being like, oh yeah, we have a prince and we've just existed for a while, so keep on letting us, guys. Instead, the thing with Andorra is Andorra has a lot of people, one of the most of these micro countries, 79,000 people. They have decent relations with the EU, and interesting enough, one of the things, their heads of government there's actually three of them. They have their own head of government, but then they also have the French president and the Spanish, either prince or president, as like part of their heads of state, which is just an interesting thing to me. The fact that they let France and Spain, who they border, have such big say, and interesting enough, also to France and Spain, if you want to fly into Andorra, which you would want to do because they have a bunch of ski slopes. I wanted to go there recently, actually. Oh wait. Andorra, if you want to fly in there, you can't fly into Andorra. They don't have their own airport. The closest one you can actually get is Barcelona, or you can fly into the south of France, which is just, it's kind of bizarre to me, the fact that if you want to go to Andorra, you cannot fly into Andorra. You have to fly into another country, because it's just too small to have its own airport. So, yeah, fun little fact right there. That's Andorra, one of the more interesting and one of the more visited and the most populated of the micro-countries. Moving on to the next secret country, though, we got San Marino in Italy, and this is one that I had not heard about until, like, a week before I made this video, so I would have missed it otherwise, and you'd be like, Toy Cat, you missed San Marino, but I didn't, because the thing about San Marino that makes it really interesting is it's just kind of chilling here in Italy, like, again, tiny little borders inside Italy. It's just kind of chilling there, and it has the highest vehicles per capita in the world, and it's the only country on Earth currently that has more vehicles than people. The average number of vehicles per person in San Marino is 1.2, and I guess that's just because they have lots of money. They have one of the best, most thriving economies in Europe. They have, like, the lowest, one of the lowest unemployment rates. They have, because obviously such a low population means the percent's going to be pretty low. They have all this stuff, and it's kind of a crazy thing. So, yeah, that's San Marino, another micro-country. The last micro-country I wanted to show you, the last one's already micro-countries, is also inside Italy, which I kind of feel sorry for Italy, just having, it's like, our borders aren't too great, we just have this kind of chilling thing here. It's actually inside Rome, so you've probably heard of this one. It's the most famous micro-country in the world, because it's also the smallest internationally recognized country. It's the Vatican City. So the Vatican City is inside Rome, so here's the size of Rome, here's the size of a country inside just the city. It's hilarious to me. Yeah, this is the Vatican City where the Pope goes and stuff, so that's a big deal. He gets his own country. The kind of way this whole thing came about was kind of a big deal. Like, I was kind of worried, but now they have kind of friendly relations. You can exit whenever you want, but most of the walls, I believe, most of the border actually is walled, if I'm not mistaken. So if you look here, there's the Vatican City right behind that wall over there. So, yeah, that's Italy. Always feel sorry for them to having two micro countries. And yeah, Vatican City's got a bunch of cool facts just because it's so small, such as if you have a small country, you get to have lots of stuff. Interesting though, Vatican City does use the euro, just because they're surrounded by Italy, which uses the euro, even though they're not part of the EU. Because again, the Pope makes things a little bit interesting, and that's that right there. So moving on from micro countries to just small countries you might not have known about, we've got Malta over here. So Malta, really, it's got like 500,000 people. It's got like the highest population density in the EU, while being the smallest country in the EU. The interesting thing you care about with Malta is that Game of Thrones, the Slavers base scenes were all shot here. So I don't actually know where about in the country it was. I'm going to miss it and get it terrible. But I believe, okay, I'll just find where all the dots are, and I'll just pick one at random. But I believe that Slavers Bay was actually shot here. So if you go here and you look, you can kind of see that Game of Thrones feel. It's all shot in Malta. So Malta, also known as Slavers Bay from Game of Thrones, or if you haven't watched Game of Thrones, Malta works too. But yeah, so that's Malta. Pretty cool country, just chilling down there. Smallest country in the EU. Probably will be for a while. Although the second smallest is Cyprus, I believe. So Cyprus is one of these big... technically, there's two countries here, but we all just say Cyprus, because there's Northern Cyprus and Cyprus. Cyprus believes it owns the whole island. Northern Cyprus believes it owns half the island. And you get this kind of weird border between the two, because there's no official border. Officially, the whole thing is Cyprus, but unofficially too. And there's weird zones of controls where, like, their capital is kind of split into two. It's kind of a big mess, the border between Cyprus and Northern Cyprus. But yeah, Cyprus is another small country you might not have known about. Also very lowly populated. Very nice destination to go on holiday, and I guess maybe that's why it's part of the EU. With that said, though, the final one I just want to mention is Iceland up here. Iceland, even though it's a pretty big country, has a really low population, lower than that of Malta, in fact, with just 300,000 people here. And one of the interesting things about that low population is, you might recall, recently there was a big scandal in Iceland, and their prime minister was in some weird tax evasion. I don't know what the whole thing was, but the key point is, something like 20,000 people got to the street, and that was 10% of their population rioting at once. And that's the equivalent of if 30 million people in the USA all went to, like, the White House, but the Icelandic equivalent, which is pretty cool, if you ask me. I mean, I don't know if cool's the right word, but that's that. Finally, we'll finish up here with Greenland, because Greenland, a lot of people think it's in Europe. It's actually not. It's part of the North American continent, and it's not actually its own country either, because even though it shows up on maps as its own country, it is really culturally distinct from Denmark, but it is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, like the next country, because we're going to move on to countries inside other countries, the Faroe Islands here. So the Faroe Islands are actually another part of they're another part of Europe, which are really, they're a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but they're their own distinct place, and they have the oldest democracy in the world. I believe they've had like a democratic council since the early 1100s, which is one of the oldest in the world, which is pretty cool. And it's just chilling on these islands up here, very, very close, by the way, to very, very close to, Norway and the UK. Don't know what it's doing belonging to Denmark. It's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, that's a thing. I believe it actually used to belong to Norway until Denmark took it at one point. Denmark's really pulling above its weight for a Nordic country. Like, it's the smallest one, but it did a lot of cool and mean things in the world. But yeah, with that said, that's that. As far as other autonomous provinces, which really are unique countries, but just kind of pretend to be another part of the country. There's one between Finland and between Sweden right here. I believe it's called the Åland. I'm going to get it wrong right here. I believe this is it, the Åland thing. Yeah, it's Åland. So this part right here is an autonomous province of Finland, despite being slightly closer to Sweden, especially the capital of Sweden. This is its autonomous province. It really isn't really either country. It just belongs to Finland. There's a lot of places like that. So, for instance, the UK is one country, as you all know, like it's just with the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, but it's actually made up of 4 countries, or is it? It's not. It's made up of 3 countries. So whenever you hear people, again, I've done a whole video of this, so we're gonna kind of skip and just say, as you all know, the UK is made up of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. 3 of those 4 countries, 3 of those 4 places are actually countries in their own right, as well as being part of this big country. But Northern Ireland doesn't actually count as a country. This is something I was mind blown by recently, and I was like, no, that's wrong. It is a country. But according to the International Standards Organization, ISO, it isn't, because the reasoning behind England, Scotland, Wales being countries is they used to be countries, then they combined to make a country, whereas Northern Ireland never officially existed as a country. It was part of Ireland, which has been a country, but then it was separated from Ireland and was always a part of the UK. Therefore, it counts as a territory and not an island. So, just in case you're curious, 3 countries and a territory make up the UK. So just in case you're like, oh, I knew all the countries already. No, you didn't. There's only 3 apparently. 3 and a bit, I guess. So yeah, 3 countries inside the UK makes things a bit interesting. There's a few other countries like that. So Belgium, for instance, really is distinctly made up of 2 separate places. There's the Flanders region, which is just to the north of, like basically Brussels and north. And there's the Wallonia region, which is the French-speaking one. They speak entirely separate languages, and every single time there's a government formed, because they have very different politics, there's like a big government shutdown because they don't really want to work together. It's one of those things where just because Flanders is very slightly bigger than Wallonia, like more Dutch than French, you get a very interesting kind of divide there, and it's one of those countries that, in my opinion, is one of the more likely contenders for like separating into 2 separate countries soon, such as, by the way, England and Scotland, which are going to go their separate ways at some point in the future. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, finally, these 2 countries split into 2. That's interesting to me. Besides that, though, what other countries are countries inside countries? There's a few of them. I was going to look up a list and go through all of them, but there's so many like official contenders and non-official. I just figured I'd go through the very biggest ones, which is Kosovo. So Kosovo isn't officially recognized by every single country in the world. It's got about 50-50 recognition, so like Spain doesn't recognize it, but most of Europe does. Russia doesn't recognize it, but yet they used it to justify invading the Crimea. It's kind of a mess when it comes to Kosovo, but Kosovo is a country. But the thing about Kosovo is because Serbia reckons they still own it, if you go into Kosovo and then you go into Serbia, you cannot actually leave Serbia because you haven't officially entered Serbia properly, and it looks like you entered illegally because this border is even though there's a border there, there's not a border there. Basically, Serbia just pretend that Kosovo is a part of them, and it makes some big messes. The same thing goes with Moldova, which is, by the way, a part of Romania, which then got not annexed, but like separated by the USSR. Moldova actually has its own separate region though, so Moldova is a pretty small country, the poorest one in Europe, in fact. So there was an amount of money roughly equal to their GDP for 1 year. Big deal, by the way. It just went missing at one point recently. Like, it destroyed their country, basically. But yeah, one of the interesting things about this is even though Moldova is a separate country off Romania, because it kind of separated and Romanians wanted to join it back, Moldova has its own separatist country to the right, which is the Transnistria region. So if we go back over here, I don't even know how to spell it, but I think it's Transnistria. The Transnistria and Moldova. I'll show you the exact borders by pulling on a map because obviously it's not an officially recognized country. This kind of thing to the west, you see the little border things there. There's just a tiny little strip that's just like, yeah, we're our own separate country. They use their own currency. It's the Transnistrian ruble, and yeah, it's just as poor as the rest of thing, and it's kind of sad in its own little way. So yeah, that's Moldova. Little bit for sad. I mean, it gets sad everything I mention it. So we'll move on from that to the final one I wanted to mention today, which is to do with Norway and Svalbard. Because Svalbard is a part of Europe, and it's the best part of Europe. It's almost one of the closest points on Earth you can get to the North Pole, and people do genuinely live there, and it's a cool little place. So with that said, though, I think I've gone over all the little secret countries of Europe. There's Liechtenstein, just a reminder, between Switzerland and Austria. There's Monaco, which is to the very south of France. It's kind of tricky to find sometimes. There it is. There's Monaco. There's Monaco to the south of France. Very, very, very tiny place. Right of Nice. There's Andorra. There is San Marino. There is the Vatican City, the smallest country on Earth that is officially recognized as sovereign. And then after that, you go into the smaller countries like Malta, you go like to Cyprus, you go to Iceland, countries you might have known about. But then you go into countries inside countries, which is England, Scotland, Wales, for example. There's the Åland province of Finland. There is the two different separate parts of Belgium, which really consider themselves to be separate, as well as Brussels. Then this is big. Then there's Kosovo, which isn't officially recognized. And then there's the Transnistria region of Moldova. They're the biggest examples of countries that are really countries, but yet aren't really countries inside Europe. Really, what I'm trying to say here, and I hope I haven't lost you on this one. Europe is a big place. It's where all the history of the world comes back to because it has like the most history in the world. And one of the really interesting things about having existed for so long is that you get massive differences just from country to country. France and Germany are next to each other, but French and German people massively different. You know, France is this close to the UK. French and English people could not be more different, and I think that's really interesting that even between even in a country this small, people from the Transnistria region are so they're actually quite different compared to Ukrainians or compared to Moldovans. Moldovans are actually quite different to Romanians, which are different to Bulgarians. Even though there's these tiny, relatively speaking, compared to the US, different distances, you get massive cultural differences between people, and that's the point I wanted to raise here. So lots of countries in Europe, try and catch them all, but you can't really, and I think that's what I want to end today's point on. So. Thank you for watching. I'm going to go watch Zootopia now. Is it called Zootopia? Zootropolis? Maybe, actually. And goodbye.